So I'm preparing a talk for the Philosophy of Psychedelics conference at the University of Exeter in April. And I have proposed to look at Rene Descartes' meditations and to kind of creatively reimagine his philosophical exercise to discover the foundations of knowledge and science by doubting everything uh, that we are taught to believe by our senses, doubting everything we are taught to believe by our culture, and instead just attending to what is clear and distinct in our most direct and immediate experience. So Descartes shuts himself in a room. He's all bundled up next to the fire, and he's just sitting there thinking. He's also sitting there with a pen and paper, right? He's writing. So Descartes' drug is the written word, the logos, um, the graphical logos, and the alphabet and writing. Yeah, it's a technology that has a transformative effect on consciousness. And uh, while Descartes did not ingest what we would normally call a psychedelic, he was under the influence of drugs. Writing, Plato in the Phaedrus talks about, or has Socrates talk about writing as a kind of drug, or pharmacon, as something um, that it sort of puts us outside ourselves. And it's easy for us to get lost in the words, to lose our memory, to begin to mistake, uh, you know, the the spell for the wisdom, where the wisdom isn't something that can be written down. It's something that, as Plato says in his letters, it must be passed from teacher to student like a candle flame to another candle. Um, Point being, wisdom is something else. And when we engage in writing and when we do drugs, we're not necessarily moving towards wholeness or moving towards wisdom. There's a way of doing drugs philosophically, there's a way of doing drugs recreationally. And Descartes certainly wasn't a recreational user of writing, right? This is a guy who invented the geometry necessary and the algebra necessary for modern science, right? This is no intellectual slouch. So he's really doing heroic doses of, um, you know, the alphabet and heroic doses of math, and it is transforming his consciousness. Now, I'm not only going to talk about Descartes, I want to talk about Descartes from a Whiteheadian point of view and also from a Schellengian point of view. And to do that, I need to tell a story. But the thing about Descartes that's so interesting is while he provides the foundation for modern science, the epistemological foundation, I should say, he does so in a way that's really quite narrative in form, quite personal and phenomenological, almost autobiographical. And uh, Descartes really merges genres, right? The meditations are as much a study in the foundations of scientific knowledge as they are a as it, the meditations is as much a theological inquiry into the nature of God and our knowledge of God. For Descartes, it's rather bizarre. I mean, for our ears today to hear that Descartes thought that God, the nature of God, as necessarily existing and being perfect, that Descartes thought we are more certain of that as an idea. We are more certain of God's existence and perfection than we are of our own existence. Because Descartes says, yes, I think therefore I am a thinking thing, and I am a finite thinking thing. We know that we're limited. We know that we sometimes err. We know that our judgments are often wrong, and we sin. We fall into error. And so Descartes says, if we know that we are finite, then we must have an idea of the infinite, and that idea of the infinite is somehow innate in us, right? And Descartes says that is God, and that the nature of this infinite idea is to exist, and that its existence must be perfect, right? And so what is perfection for Descartes? Perfection is the Christian Godhead. What is that? Well, Descartes didn't go too much into that in the Meditations, right? But he seems to be suggesting that we have innately within us an experiential portal straight into the core of the Godhead, and that we don't necessarily need to ask permission of some authority in order to inquire into the nature of the Godhead. Now, it's weird for our contemporary ears, where we're just more kind of atheistic in our daily thought habits, to think that God's more certain than our own ego, right? We live in an age of individualism. Most people who do believe in some form of theism certainly think that it's a theism they have decided to assent to, or to believe in, or to practice, to be devoted to, right? It's not just inherited and unquestioned. So we're right in line with Descartes, though, right? If we're willing to inquire into this Godhead within us, we have like a contact with God in the wild, so to speak, rather than inside the church walls, where God's been domesticated by the history of religion. Descartes was telling us, hey, wake up, look inside. The infinite is there. And in some way you are that, and yet you're not. You have fallen away from it. You have inhabited, become incarnate in a body, in a world of other bodies. How is this soul, this ego, related to this body, right? And this is where Descartes' meditation, or his trip, his psychedelic journey, starts to take a rather frightening turn, right? Where the demon is conjured, the deceitful demon. So rather than a perfect, good God, there is a deceitful demon who makes Descartes question everything about the world he senses around him, everything about his own bodily existence, everything about even his own inner soul life that's accidental and not essential to him, everything that's not his own thinking activity there and then in that moment. Descartes destroys, annihilates, and all that's left is this thinking thing alone in infinite space. And it's there, though, that Descartes contacts God, right? And that contact with God alone in this infinite space somehow provides the seed out of which grows Descartes' entire theory of the world. Whitehead has a lot to say to Descartes in Process and Reality. I mean, many, many pages of detailed interpretation, critique, and reconstruction of Descartes' ideas in Process and Reality. And I want to talk a little bit about that, but not right now. I'm going to keep working on my paper here and see what Whitehead would say to Descartes.